What's going on, folks? Welcome to the Spun Today podcast, the podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 168 of the show. And in this episode, I had the pleasure and honor of speaking with Miss Sandra Holtzman. Sandra is an award-winning copywriter. She is an entrepreneur that has started multiple businesses. She is the chief marketing strategist at Marketing Cures. She is an educator teaching both marketing and entrepreneurship as well as other courses at NYU, FIT, as well as the Kaufman Fast Track course, which is a 12-week hyper-intensive course on entrepreneurship, which I took and is where I had the good fortune of meeting Sandra. And last but certainly not least, she is also a writer. She's the co-author of Lies Startups Tell Themselves to Avoid Marketing, a no-bullshit guide for PhDs, lab rats, suits, and entrepreneurs. Links to which, as always, will be in the episode notes. We went into all of these topics during our conversation. I had a lot of fun speaking with Sandra and getting to know her a bit more outside of the classroom setting. And I definitely got a bunch of takeaways for myself during this episode, as I'm sure a lot of you will as well. Whether you are an entrepreneur that owns their own business, someone who's looking to start a business, whether you're a writer, an educator, whether you're into marketing, Sandra is something of a Renaissance woman. So there will be something for each and every one of you in this episode. Sandra, thanks again very much for taking the time and coming on the show. You absolutely have an open invitation to do so in the future, because I know folks are going to get a lot from this episode. Oh, and before I forget, happy Thanksgiving to folks listening here in the US. It's been a pretty crazy year with COVID, and I know this holiday season is not going to be like most, but I definitely wish you and yours a happy and safe Thanksgiving. And in retrospect, once this is all over, I guess it'll serve as a reminder to cherish and appreciate the things that really matter. And with that, folks, I'm going to tell you about a very quick way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast, and then we'll be jumping right into the conversation with Sandra. You know that feeling you get on a Monday when the weekend already feels like a distant memory and the next one feels like it's weeks away? Have no fear, my friends. The Spun Today newsletter is here. And it's here to make it so that your Mondays don't have to suck. Come on, guys. I can lead you to the water, but I can't make you drink it. You have to do that part on your own by going to spuntoday.com/subscribe. I put together a free weekly newsletter that I send out to all of my subscribers every Monday at noon. Here's what's in it. A photo of the week so that you can take your mind off the mundane and enjoy the scenic route. A podcast of the week, because I listen to dozens of podcasts every single week from a wide range of shows, and I cherry pick the very best ones and recommend them to you here. The Spun Today newsletter also includes a video of the week, which will include anything from a TED Talk to a rap battle to a tasty recipe that I stumbled upon or a dope interview. A quote of the week for some food for thought, and a word of the week for my fellow wordsmiths out there to step up your vocab. So you'll be getting 5 things absolutely for free every Monday at noon in your inbox. If you choose to subscribe, all you have to do is go to spuntoday.com/subscribe, drop in your email address, and you'll get the very next one. All right, Spun Today listeners, today we have an absolute treat. Joining us on the episode is Miss Sandra Holtzman. Sandra is an entrepreneur that has started several businesses. She is an educator. She is a copywriter. She is also an author. She has written the book Lies Startups Tell Themselves to Avoid Marketing, a no bullshit guide for PhDs, lab rats, suits, and entrepreneurs. I had the pleasure of meeting Sandra by partaking in the Kaufman Fast Track course, which we'll get into a little bit later. But first and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you, Sandra, for joining me today on the Spun Today podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I wanted to dig into more of your background first, if you don't mind. I just wanted for you to share with us a bit more of where you grew up, your different career paths that you decided to partake in, and tell us how Sandy became Sandy.
I grew up in Manhattan, all the way north in the Dyckman Street projects. And when I was growing up, I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be a choreographer. The choreographer stuff dropped off kind of early because it wasn't a typical thing that a girl went into in the 50s and 60s and 70s, whatever. And I thought about wanting to be a writer until I became a copywriter many years later. And so I had kind of a disjointed education. In elementary school, I moved from the third best class to the first best class. And then from the first best class to the to junior high school, where I went from the first best class to a 3-year SP class. I don't know what they're called, like a progressive class.
Like the advanced placement.
Constantly changing. I'm sorry?
Like the advanced placement classes, like AP classes?
A little bit, yeah.
Gotcha.
Kind of like that. And so I was constantly changing peers, and some groups I fit in with and some groups I didn't fit in with because the clique had started 4 or 5 years before I got there, and who the hell was this woman they were suddenly transferring into the class? And then, it changed. Most of the people I went to junior high school with went to the same high school, which was George Washington High School, and I went to Bronx Science. So, again, another mix-up of people, and got some friends from there who have lasted my whole life. And from science, I wanted to be an English major. What was I doing in Bronx Science? I don't know, but it was a good education. Went to Lehman College after that. So 7 years in the same neighborhood down the block from each other. Graduated with honors and then got, I didn't have an official dual major, but I had English and film. And then I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do for graduate school. So I applied for graduate school in film and graduate school in English, and wound up trying to go to 2 graduate schools simultaneously in 2 different states for 2 different subjects.
Wow.
And I was a little ambitious. And I wound up doing that for a year. Middlebury has the Breedlove School of English, which means during 4 summers and you get your master's degree. I went for the first summer. And then I got my master's degree in cinema studies at NYU. And then tried to break into the film industry and couldn't do it because they just weren't hiring women as a rule and didn't have the chutzpah to figure out how to get in. So a lot of my friends said, well, you're a writer, so I became a copywriter. And all of business I found, or at least the business I was doing, is problem solving. So when you get a creative assignment or you're taking a crew out, which I wound up doing for a while, in the film business, you're solving problems. Here's the issue. How do you get around it? How do you make it work? And in creative, what you did was, we need an ad. This is what needs to be in it. And then you sit with an art director, you sit alone, and you come up with a solution that'll grab people's attention and speak to them emotionally. So I did that, and it turned out I had quite a knack for that, and started winning awards, and then went on to be a copywriter, and moved up to consumer ad agencies, to pharmaceutical ad agencies. And in the early 90s, I got laid off, and that was when the beginnings of mergers and acquisitions started happening across not only pharmaceutical companies, but ad agencies. And so I freelanced for a couple of years and wound up as an associate creative director in Philadelphia, and I commuted for 2.5 years, loved it. And then fortunately, I had a business mentor and friends who said, start your own business. So after 2 years, I got laid off there when they lost a big client, and I started my own business. And I was extremely lucky. The client that they lost withdrew his business because they were moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they wanted a West Coast ad agency. But he left that company, went to work at a new company, and 2 months after I started my business, brought me in. And at the same time, I had been freelancing for a consulting company, a management consulting company that had Pfizer as a client. And when the management gig was up, I had become close to the Pfizer client, and she recommended me to a division in Pfizer, and I became the unofficial agency of record for them for 10 years.
Wow, that's an amazing break there.
Yeah, I was very lucky being in the right place at the right time with the right skills and the right relationship.
Absolutely.
So, and then I've been in that agency, my own agency, since 1997. So how long is that? 24 years now? Pretty good. And I changed the name of the agency along the way, and then everything evolved. So around 2010.
And what's the name of the agencies, Sandra?
It was Holtzman Communications, but it's not. If you go there, you won't find anything now. So we changed it to marketingcures.com because it had double meaning. And then around 2010, I met some people who suggested, I'm cutting out a lot. I wrote the book in about 2010 also. In 2010, I met some people at the Levin Institute, and I went for training and became certified as a Kaufman Fast Track Facilitator, and have been doing that since 2010. And then along the way, I started teaching at Fashion Institute of Technology. I teach several courses there, and NYU, where I teach just one course in marketing in the Masters in Integrated Marketing at NYU. And I worked at a few other schools here and there. And I teach Fast Track now for the city, and I teach it for a women's nonprofit organization in New Jersey called the Women's Center for Entrepreneurship. Let's backtrack a little. Around 2010 also, I was brought in to be put together a management team for a company, and I became the chief marketing officer. I put together the management team consisting of the CIO, chief information officer, CFO, chief financial officer, and the advisory board, which consisted of several people well known in the field. That gig ended in about 6 to 8 months, when we wound up getting an investor and we had an exit. And most of the people cashed out except for the CEO, who went on to become the CEO of the company that cashed us out. And at the same time I started another company with a colleague that I knew from Pfizer. That lasted about a year, but it didn't work out. And as I tell people, and I told you in the class, my colleague had an incurable disease. And before everybody starts pulling out handkerchiefs, the incurable disease is lack of ethics. So you can't always predict. Yeah, you can't always predict that about people until you actually start working with them. And now I'm working on my fourth startup with another colleague who I co-taught with for 10 years at Fast Track. And this company is called, we have two different names for it, depending on whether you come through her or me, but it's still the same company. I call it Marketing Cures GPS, growth, pivot, and sustainability, I think. And hers is significant results GPS. And what we're doing is, starting in January, we're putting together peer advisory mastermind groups that are going to run a year, 3 hours a month. And in those groups, entrepreneurs will have 8 to 12 in each group, and they will work with each other to set a goal for each individual company, a 1-year goal of what they want to reach, and then they'll work with the peers in the group to help each other get to that goal. And the importance of that is, there was a Harvard study done that 97%, I think, of people who work with other people are successful. So, and I use the African proverb, if you want to get somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to get somewhere far, go with people. And so we all need a support system, whether it's official, unofficial, informal. And these mastermind groups form a support system that lasts well beyond the 1 year. And the first one I worked on, actually I've worked on a couple. First one I worked on, they're still meeting. And that group was over almost a year ago. So
that's awesome.
It's very powerful, especially in COVID times, because people are feeling isolated as entrepreneurs anyway.
Very true.
It makes it even harder.
And I can even see a microcosm of that concept in the Fast Track course that we took, and just working together like in groups and the bonds that we formed, and I can already tell that they are going to be lasting relationships, some of them, so that it breeds sort of kind of like accountability, and you don't want to leave your like group mates down, and you want to help. And, it definitely translates in that way as well.
Absolutely. You're nurturing and cheerleading each other.
Very true.
And when I started in New York, when I started my business in 1997, I had just been commuting to Philadelphia for close to 2.5, 3 years. All of a sudden, I'm working from my apartment, and if my computer goes out, I can't call the guy down the hall and have him come running because he's in Philadelphia. And so all my support system was in Philadelphia, and I had to start recreating it from scratch in New York. And it took a while. And the other thing of starting your own business is people don't understand that some people can't handle the loneliness. I don't call it loneliness, but they get lonely. So, for instance, I had a colleague from my old agency in New York, and she started her own business, and we met at a networking thing. She was so excited, and it was great and all that. And then I met her about 4 months later, and she said to me, I went back on staff, and I said, what happened? And she said, I couldn't stand being alone all the time. And that never occurred to me. And I started thinking, when I started my business and all this business was coming through the door, I ordered out lunch, and I was on the phone with the client while eating my lunch. I ordered out dinner, or I went to dinner alone, but I was always busy, and I never felt lonely. So I guess entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and you have to figure out where your priorities are, both commercially in terms of business and personally and emotionally. Can you work alone? Do you need the water cooler concept? Do you need to be able to talk to people? And this is why being in a mastermind group helps, because you form those relationships that are of value. They're not just people you know. They're people who you can turn to for help and who can turn to you for help.
Exactly. And you have, I would imagine, like-minded individuals, but also people that are going through similar situations, and you can bounce ideas off each other and coping mechanisms.
Right. And when you reach a certain level, your business is in a certain level, there's expertise that people can share. So somebody may be a social media maven and help you with that if that's not your expertise. And you may be a real estate maven and be able to help them with leases and brick and mortar purchases, which they may not have. So everybody contributes their expertise to each other. And that's really empowering and really, really great.
Absolutely. I can definitely see that. Sandy, I want to take a step back and ask you a quick question about when you mentioned that when you were trying to break into the film industry. Was that to what capacity was that? Were you writing screenplays, or were you? No.
I always told everybody I was never going to be the great American novelist. I didn't have a novel in me. So when I actually wrote the book, I would kind of shock myself. But no, I broke in. I wanted to be a producer. I tried to get into the Directors Guild of America, and I could have bought my union card. But if you don't have the contacts, having a $2,000 union card is $2,000 then. I don't know what it is now. Without having the contacts, having the union card was irrelevant. And so I tried to break into the industry, and I wasn't there yet emotionally and business-wise, and also the industry wasn't hiring women. And so I go out on interviews, and they say, we don't hire women. And I'd say, that's illegal. And they say, so what?
Wow.
So, and then people going for their PhDs, and they had rejection letters from universities and from film schools and business all over their walls. They could wallpaper their entire apartment with rejection letters. And probably the best thing that ever happened to me was I got turned down from the PhD program, and I had to go out and be out in the real world. And that really, don't forget, the 70s was a very different time.
Yeah, so, I was gonna interject real quick and just say I can't, I would imagine most people listening wouldn't be able to imagine that type of response from someone nowadays with PC culture and all this kind of stuff. But back in the day, it's you don't have social media, you don't really have an outlet as an individual to voice concerns and stuff like that. So people could, employers or whomever or people in positions of power could very easily tell you to fuck off, and you really have no recourse.
No cancel culture.
Exactly.
No public embarrassment. No alternative. So, and don't forget, the 50s generation was growing up, and all of a sudden everything was starting to explode. You had gay rights, you had Black power, you had women's rights, all happening at the same time. plus the explosion of the marijuana drug culture, and the hippiedom. And so, music was changing. Everything was changing. The theater, film, all the arts were in the avant-garde. It was a very exciting time to be alive, and very confusing for traditionalists. The film industry was, and probably still is, very traditional for men, white men.
Yeah.
And it's true of most industries. You look at the top, and there are white men.
Yeah, like the C-suite and the folks in the board of directors and at the top are definitely skewed towards white men.
Right. The Barbara Cochrans of the world are rare. Less rare now, but still, So did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And but folks with the experiences such as yours and the ability to have come from that to kind of like carve your own path, paved the way for the fact that things are changing now. So that's that's amazing. Now, another question I have for you is, you mentioned that first, I'm not sure if it was the first company, but the company that had the 8-month exit. And I just wanted to highlight that that's one of the things that we touched on during the course, the difference between a lifestyle business versus a growth business. And a lifestyle business, from my understanding, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, is a business that you establish and you run, and it supports your lifestyle. So you kind of like work in it or run it, but it's an ongoing business that pays for your mortgage, pays for your expenses, etc., and supports your lifestyle. Whereas a growth business is a business that has the intended goal of selling itself off to an investor in the future. And in this case, that business would be considered, by my understanding, a growth business. My question is, was that the goal to sell it in 8 months, or did you guys have a longer term plan, or was it like a surprise that it wound up selling and becoming a growth business?
No, we were looking for. It was a little complicated. I don't want to get into the whole story, but we were the marketing arm of a company that couldn't afford to hire us. So we formed a separate company, and the other company would absorb us if we brought in investment. So the goal from the beginning was to bring in investment and to grow the other company. So to first to get absorbed and then to grow the other company. But once we had the company that absorbed us was already public.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we had to do that. But yes, we brought in an angel investor, and that enabled us to raise the money to get absorbed. Some of us left the company, cashed out.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Now
it was it's a wild ride, and people don't understand. Most people coming up in the entrepreneur world don't understand that when you go to do something like that, or to go public, it's like getting on a roller coaster, and you're working 24/7 to make that happen. And I think I told the story in the class, but when I had my first office, I was down the block from the Blue Water Grill, and I went in one day to order out lunch, and while I was at the bar waiting for it, I ran into somebody who was a biotech entrepreneur. And so after we chatted, exchanged cards, and we're still in touch, I said, "So, how long have you been divorced?" And he did a double take. Like, how did I know that? Because I knew everybody who was working in a launch company was probably divorced, probably had at least 2 mortgages on their house to raise money. That's called skin in the game, which a lot of entrepreneurs today do not understand and will not take that risk. And so, he looked at me and then he told me, and he said, "How long have you been divorced?" And I said, "I've never been married." And it was like, see?
Yeah.
Both sides of the same coin.
Yeah, you circumvented the whole marriage thing. You knew where it was going.
Yeah. And I've worked with people who were entrepreneurs in large Fortune 500 companies where they were traveling 5 days a week across the country. And one of them made a guarantee to his wife that he would always be home on the weekend. That's how absorbing this was when you were launching a business, especially in tech. And people don't understand that. People don't understand that you can't have everything.
Yeah.
And it's a huge sacrifice.
It's all consuming, and to the folks that happen to have like families and try to embark on something like that, I would imagine it's like a complete like family undertaking. Like your wife's in it, your kids are in it to to an extent in terms of like the sacrificing and, not having mom or dad around because they're, embarking on this journey. And I could definitely see the ripple effect strains that would have on relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's difficult. Even when I was writing the book, one of my clients was supposed to co-write the book with me. We said he lives in Cincinnati or lived in Cincinnati at the time. He's since retired and lives in Florida now. He lives in Cincinnati in this really nice house with 3 kids and a wife who worked full time. And I was in New York. And he said, Sandy, if you come here, I'm going to be distracted. If I go to New York, you're going to be distracted. So let's get a suite in a hotel in Chicago, which was kind of sort of maybe halfway, and spend a week and just knock out the guts of the book. And I said, fine. And that came up in around March or April. I think in June he got a job as a CEO. And I knew right then he wasn't going to be able to write the book, but I kept asking him and he kept saying, yeah, next month. And September I wrote and I said, this isn't going to happen. And he goes, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. And then I found a co-author who would write the book with me, and that's how we got the book done. But it's the distraction of everyday life and what you're doing in terms of business that makes it very hard to sit down and focus on writing something or focus on any kind of project.
Definitely. And, it's kind of like you have to like pick and choose your battles. Like with me, I think I mentioned to you, like I self-published 2 books. One of them is definitely not the, next great American novel, but it is my first attempt at one. Or not really at one, but it's a time travel sci-fi fantasy of a group of righteous individuals that go back and try to like right the wrongs of the past. And the other book is I'm not sure if you've ever read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. It's kind of like a motivational, inspirational type of, kick in the ass kind of book.
No, I haven't.
I highly recommend it to everyone, especially creatives. And I'll send you links to it. I've mentioned it on the podcast a bunch of different times, and I'll link to it in the episode notes for anybody listening. But that's the book that got me to write my first book, which was kind of like an homage to Stephen Pressfield's book. It was I used to do a lot of, and I still do a lot of free writing. So it's just like pen to paper, write whatever comes out. And I started seeing this theme. I have a bunch of different notebooks, and I do it freehand. And I started seeing this theme of kind of like me speaking to myself and trying to motivate myself to write something. Like I strung along a bunch of those free writing pieces, and wanted to go through the process of figuring out how do I bring this out to the public and self-publish. And like I taught myself how to do all that stuff with the help of Stephen Pressfield's book and listening to podcasts about self-publishing, etc. I say all that just to say that it was kind of like a conscious decision to pick and choose my battles, because I work full time. I'm married, have 2 kids now. At the time was before we had our first son, and I had to take advice from Stephen Pressfield and also from Stephen King's book on writing, his memoir, which is great as well. And it says that you have to make a conscious decision basically to treat it like a business.
Was Stephen King's book scary?
No. It's actually the book.
I worked on this when I worked at Warner Brothers. I worked on the signing, and I couldn't read the book. I sat in the movie theater, curled in a fetal position because I was terrified.
Oh, damn. No, it's a great book. It's on like the writing process in general, and he tells you about his experiences with writing his books, and like when he first got published. And he tells a crazy story actually. When he wrote Cujo, he used to drink a lot, and he was coked up, and he literally did not remember writing the book at all. Like he says to this day, he literally does not remember writing one word, but he wrote it. So he tells like stories like that, and they give like really practical advice that I appreciated and implemented myself, of saying, okay, from this time to this time, this is when I'm going to write. You have to be very protective of your time. form some sort of ritual if you need to. Make sure your family's on board and let them know that from, even if it's 10 p.m. to 3 in the morning, this is the don't interrupt me time. Or like for me,
that's how, I can't remember the author, sorry to interrupt, but that's how he wrote Jaws. Every morning he spent 3 hours writing, and in the afternoon he'd play tennis or he'd do other things. But every morning he spent 3 solid hours writing.
Nice. Absolutely. And that was like similar to the approach that I took. It was like, especially after we had our first son, you have to kind of sort of get creative with when and how you find time. So with me, with the podcasting and the writing, which is kind of like a dual effort of sorts, used to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, work on either website stuff or like posts to help promote my writing, or or the podcast. And I would do that until 6:30 in the morning, then get ready to go to work, and then commute to work, come back home, and then at night my wife and my son would go to bed relatively early, around 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and then I would stay up until from that time till like 1 or 2 in the morning. It's a dedication of sorts that if you choose to do something, like you have to, like they said, and I guess what I'm saying now is like be creative with your time and figure out how you're gonna make it work. Like how you were just saying with the first gentleman that you were attempting to write the book with, and then you had to come to terms with the fact of, okay, this isn't gonna work this way, and you have to figure out how to make it work.
Well, kudos to you. Not only did you write 2 books, but you self-published, which is a whole other business venture. I found a publisher. And either way, you have to promote the book. But I can't imagine having to self-publish.
Yeah, definitely. I got a lot of help from a podcast called the Creative Pen Podcast, which I always mention on my podcast. And it's Joanna Penn, which is a thriller author and an entrepreneur herself, and she tells her story, and she pretty much worked in corporate America for 10 to 15 years while writing on the side, and eventually was able to make enough money from her publishing business to be able to leave the corporate life and focus solely on writing. And she has a podcast, and she's very open with all her like information and her strategies. And eventually she was able to turn into like a 6-figure business, and her husband was able to leave his job and come help her run the business. And, she gets to do what she loves. She's self-published, I think, like a dozen novels and like half a dozen other books about writing and the business of writing and stuff like that. And, I definitely get a lot of good practical advice from her in that podcast that, helped me find out like what Scrivener is, which is a writing program, and that helps you format the book in, for Kindles and also for paperbacks. And, I learned like a wealth of information, what Amazon KDP is, where folks can upload their manuscripts and put them on sale through Amazon, and then the difference between being exclusive to Amazon and going wide and being able to do the same thing, but in terms of uploading your manuscript, but selling it on like Barnes & Noble, for example, and Kobo and all these other platforms. It's stuff I guess when you get into it, and like I said, when you want to focus on something and be creative with your time and figure things out, you gravitate towards folks putting out that information. At least that's how it's been for me. So I definitely want to segue now into more about your book. So I'll say the title again is Lies That Startups Tell Themselves to Avoid Marketing, a no bullshit guide for PhDs, lab rats, suits, and entrepreneurs. So I guess my first question would be, do you have any like specific rituals or times that you choose to write?
Well, for the book, I wrote chapter 1, and I spent a year rewriting chapter 1. And and I kept writing it, and I had, I had a form of writer's block. I couldn't move on past chapter 1. I was stuck. And this happened when my first co-author, I was talking to him, and then when I got my second co-author, she lived in Lambertville at the time in New Jersey, and so I would come down to the weekend, and on Saturday morning we would spend 3 hours writing. and then we'd just go and play the rest of the weekend. And then on Sunday, we'd spend another hour or two. And so we wrote the book in about 6 or 8 months, maybe a year.
Nice.
And the way she talked to me was, let's put aside chapter 1 and we'll come back and work on that last. Let's get everything else down. And I was so worried about chapter 1 that I didn't realize that words can be changed. You can change the thoughts. Everything can be edited. It could flow better. Articulation of concepts could be better. And so when the year was over, we never went back and changed chapter 1 because I had really done it.
Nice.
And so that was my style. Now when I write, I blogged for about a year. I was a small business blogger for Fashion Institute of Technologies. I can't remember the name of the blog, but for their blog. So I published it for them. First I started with my own blog. Then I did FIT's blog. And so I published it for FIT first and then run it on my blog because they have rights of first publication. And then what I did was, after about 2.5 years of writing weekly, I took a break for a week, and that turned into 2 weeks, and turned into 3 weeks, and I never went back. But 2.5, 3 years writing every week was a lot. First I thought, I'm going to run out of subject matter. And I never ran out of subject matter. I just ran out of steam. So now I will post on my blog if I go to a particularly good conference or meeting and I want to share the information that came up, or I have a guest blogger whose information I think is important. But blogging, I don't blog as much as I used to, and I've moved on. So now I post things about my business and information about I kind of like post as opposed to blog. I post resources for people, connections
Nice.
for people, things that are important, organizations that I think they should look into. Not necessarily join, but get on the mailing list because, you need to know what's going on in the world. And everybody's running meetings and everybody's running organizations, but there are a few that are really, really valuable to everybody. I'll post those.
That's awesome. And where can people find that? Where's your blog?
On Facebook, it's Marketing Cures. And sometimes I'll post it on my personal Facebook page. But right now I'm posting pretty pictures of Christmas. And then you can go to marketingcures.com/blog. I will post on LinkedIn. And I was posting on Twitter, but for some reason they blocked my account. And I haven't been posting anything that would cause that to happen. So I emailed them and asked them to look into it, and they never got back to me. So I don't know what happened, but I'm kind of blocked from Twitter.
Oh, damn.
So yeah, I'm not. As you can tell, I'm not broken up about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. You want to talk about sexism? I couldn't get my name I couldn't get my business's name 23 years put into Wikipedia. I hired 2 different experts, and Wikipedia turned me down saying this was self-promotion. So, excuse me, is the Madison Avenue ad agency not self-promotion being on Wikipedia? I didn't get it. So they're biased against women, and they're biased against small businesses. And so there are issues, even
Absolutely.
to this day. And this bias is just, against people for whatever reason. So it becomes interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
And you don't find out that the roadblocks are there until you try and overcome them.
Yep, definitely.
So,
Sandy, quick question regarding when you said that you were going to Jersey, writing for 3 hours. How were you and your co-author? Your co-author is Jean Condek.
Condek,
right? Okay.
Yeah.
How are you guys like doing the physical writing? Were you like on pen and paper? Were you on 2 different laptops? Was it like what was like the physical approach to writing?
We had one computer, hers, because I was at her place.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before I now have like 4 computers lying around my house. This was before I had a lot of laptops, so I didn't have to schlep the laptop. She had desktop, and we wrote in Word. And if I thought of something on the way home, or when I was traveling, then I'd write it down in longhand. But I composed at the computer.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess at the end did you guys have an editor or like publisher lined up already at that point, or like did you start like shopping for one afterwards after writing the initial manuscript?
I think we wrote most of the book. I can't remember. I got to tell you, Tony.
No worries.
I think we wrote most or all of the book. The beginning, each chapter has a quote from somebody well-known, a thought leader in some areas. Like somebody who worked with George Soros introduces one chapter. He's in charge of $1 billion fund. The guy who launched 1-2-3 for Lotus wrote the intro to another chapter. A serial entrepreneur, serial CEO wrote an introduction to another chapter. So people like that. So we got them. And then my original co-author wrote the introduction to the book, and he's a great writer. But what happened was I went around to a lot of agents, got rejected, and this is right after the 2008 downturn, the market crash.
With the recession.
So, the recession. So whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Bad times at Ridgemont High.
I was working real estate and I was a mortgage processor during that time. That's when I exited that and went into corporate America.
You were in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a rejection letter from in the feature film business. They're called readers. They read the proposal and then they either pass it on or they reject you. So I got rejected, and I got annoyed because I thought it was a lowly person, and so I wrote another letter to somebody else in the organization, and they called me in and talked to me, and they said, "Look, you wrote the proposal wrong. I followed something on the internet." And she said, "That's not the way you write the proposal." So she gave me some hints, and we rewrote the proposal. And she said, the agent said, "We're not representing you. Nobody's buying business books at this point. So if I wasn't doing a cookbook or a mystery, I was out of luck." And she said, "However, we share office space with a small publisher who publishes business books, and they're interested." So I rewrote it, sent it to her, and then wound up finding my publisher. By the way, we all worked in the same building.
Wow, that's
ironically,
great.
or coincidentally, yeah, it was great. So they published my book, and now I've lost touch with them because the book has been out for a while.
Yeah.
But you don't realize until you publish your own book that you have to do the marketing. You can't and publishers are really great at this. They get people to carry the book, they sell it into the industry. But if you're not selling to consumers who are going to look for it and creating the demand, book isn't going to sell that much.
Definitely.
So yes, I'm on Amazon. I was in Barnes & Noble, but nobody was going to buy it because they weren't concentrating on the public. So then I had to put several $1,000s into hiring publicists, et cetera, and the book moved. The book is still good because there's no social media in the book. Social media was just starting to pick up, other than websites. But we didn't write the book for tactics, and social media is a tactic. We wrote it for the strategy. What do you do? Why should you market? What's the strategy? And as you know so well from being in the class, tell me who your market is. Don't tell me you're going to be on Instagram, and don't tell me you're going to be on TikTok, and don't tell me where you're going to be. Where does your customer go? And that's the most important thing. So, the algorithms change, every week. But where does your customer look for what they want? And that's where you need to be, whether it's glamorous or unglamorous. And people didn't understand that. And then there's the other, I'll read you a couple of the lies. If I build it, they will come. My product is so great that once it's introduced, people are going to find out about it. We don't know how, but that's their fantasy. They're going to find out about it and rush to buy it.
Yeah,
not going to happen.
That definitely doesn't happen.
But this happens with scientists especially. There's no point in promoting my product until it's completely ready. Well, you have to build your market as you're building the product, because if you want to build a laundromat, okay, or you want to buy real estate for a laundromat, well, that's great. Let's say you open your laundromat January 1st, for argument's sake. But if you haven't told people that a laundromat is opening and what the location is and what the deals are, January 1st, nobody's going to show up at your door. You got to promote it while you're working out your deals.
Absolutely.
And people don't understand that.
You have to build up the demand.
Right. You got to make people want it. So people don't understand that. And then, I only need a website. I do public relations first. I have a business plan. I don't need a marketing plan. People try to not spend money or not spend time. And the bottom line is PR is okay, but if you do PR, you do marketing, you don't have a website, where are the people going to go check you out? If you have a website, you don't do PR or marketing, how are people going to know the website is there?
Very true.
It all works in concert. It's like an orchestra. It all works together.
Definitely.
So, and the last lie was, I can get the work done cheaper, which I hear from a lot, because a lot of the classes I teach in, entrepreneurs don't pay fees. But an entrepreneur has never said to me, or never answered this appropriately. I go, well, I can get that free, or, I'll put up a website from here and I can get the website free. And then I ask them, well, can I have your cupcakes for free? And they get all offended that I'm asking for something for free. Yeah, they want everything for free. So it's a double-edged sword of, actually it's not. It's like, you got to put skin in the game. You got to spend money to make money. And if you expect to get everything free and then expect to have people come around and buy your product, there's a disconnect there. And I'm not saying there aren't a huge amount of free services. However, there comes a point where you gotta put up or shut up. And a lot of entrepreneurs aren't willing to do that.
Definitely. You have to have the
skin in the game. Anyway, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome. And folks, again, you can pick up Sandy's book on Amazon. Again, I will link to it in the episode notes. It's called Lies Startups Tell Themselves to Avoid Marketing, a no bullshit guide for PhDs, lab rats, suits, and entrepreneurs.
And I think it's under $10 on Amazon.
Nice.
So it's not a big investment, and it'll just give you this a lot. It's written for scientists, biotech and stuff, but anybody can read it, because it's the same argument everybody uses to avoid marketing. I don't need marketing. Let me get the product out.
And it sounds like it has a lot of fundamental principles to marketing.
Right, exactly. Right.
Nice.
Basic strategies.
Awesome. And cool. Sandy, to segue to, I want to be conscious of and cognizant of your time, of course, but just to segue into like your teaching experiences, like you mentioned then, and the fast track course, do you have any subjects that you like teaching more than others? Or how has your experience with teaching the fast track course been? And if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
I love working with entrepreneurs, because they're not there for a certificate. I mean, you get a graduation certificate. They're not there to fulfill a certificate program. They're not there to get their master's degree or a BA. They're there because they want to start a business, and they're passionate, and they want to be there. And they're like sponges. Give me the information. Give me the information. And it's like, the excitement and the energy and the passion is very exciting to me as an entrepreneur. So that's probably my first choice, but I teach marketing, and I'm passionate about marketing also, because so many people do it poorly, and teaching the language of marketing before you actually get into the practice. So I like that as well. I'm certified to teach. I teach it anyway, but I'm certified to teach Fast Track New Ventures, Fast Track Growth Venture, the Female Entrepreneur, and Fast Track Tech Venture. So I teach all of those. I coach for Fast Track. I coach some of the, sometimes they put together coaching sessions for graduates. I coach separately on my own. And for FIT, they have a program called Fashion Business Essentials. It's, I think, 10 sessions or 9 sessions. And I put together the syllabus, and I hired all the people to teach each segment. So now an administrator took it over. So I just teach the introductory segment, and I teach one other segment. And I teach Setting a Course for Your Business, which is a 4-week course for fashion businesses. Then Know Your Market, and how to do research, why you need to do research, and then formulating your financial strategy. So 3 different courses towards a certificate program. And I teach at NYU. I taught at Baruch.
I actually went to Baruch. I graduated Baruch.
Oh, yeah? Great school.
Yeah, definitely. I like
probably one of the most unsung heroes of New York City education. Really, really great school. I taught social media marketing, luxury fashion marketing for startups. I think I taught basic entrepreneurship there, and briefly taught pharmaceutical marketing, healthcare marketing at another school in the city. And I was scheduled to teach entrepreneurship at New York Institute of Technology. But what happened is COVID came along, so they moved all the courses online, and then no one wanted to spend the money to sign up online. They said, well, if we're not going to be there in person, we can get the course cheaper somewhere else. And the whole program collapsed. So that was kind of sad.
Oh, wow.
And then I was supposed to start teaching for a private school for entrepreneurs coming over from Europe. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and I don't know what happened, but they put everything on hold. I don't even know if the school still exists.
Well,
It's really sad, yeah. Especially with the quality of people working there and the amount of effort and money they had to put in to securing a brick and mortar space, to securing licenses and stuff to be able to teach and be certified, in New York State, all kinds of other stuff. It's sad.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely a sad time.
Yeah, and then occasionally, a couple times I went back to Bronx Science, and and a couple times to NYU, where they had high school kids come in and talked about what it's like to be an entrepreneur and be out in the world. And the thing about Bronx Science, interestingly, when I went, it was mostly boys. I don't know what the statistical breakdown was, but when I went back, it was mostly girls, and I was so thrilled. Girls in science, girls in math.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was great. Yeah, it was
Times
like
are changing.
20 years later. Huh?
Times are changing for sure. Thanks to people
exactly.
like
you. Yeah, thank you. So it was exciting. So that's it. So where do you go next, Tony?
Well, me, I'm definitely continuing the podcasting, the writing, being creative with my time and holding myself more accountable. Because, like, for example, with my first novel, it took me 3 years to get it from when I first had the idea, which I still have the notebook. I keep all my notebooks where I like to start writing freehand and just doing like the whole free writing thing and coming up with ideas that way. And then I translate that to the computer, and I use a writing program called Scrivener that's like really like user friendly for writers, where you can, before I used to use Microsoft Word, but like with Scrivener, for example, instead of having to like copy and paste a section, and when you want to like move things around, like it literally gives you the option to like drag and drop like this page into this chapter, that page into this chapter, and it's like it's like created for writers, the software. Then I eventually translate things there, but I always write like the date and time on everything that I free write. And then I went back after publishing the novel, and I figured like it felt like I took like a year and a half, and I look back and it was like 3 years to write the first one, and I was like,
wow.
Oh shit. And
did you use a formula? Because a lot of mysteries and science fictions, they work on formulas.
Definitely, I followed Sean Coyne's The Story Grid. He has a book called The Story Grid and a podcast called The Story Grid. And I listened to a ton of different podcasts, as folks listening would know that, I'm always like referencing and recommending. He's actually the editor for Stephen Pressfield, and he's an editor with over like 25 years of experience. And, he teaches about the inciting incident of a story, the climax, the resolution, and like all the technical aspects to story writing. So I try to like emulate that, and again, like kind of like a self-taught type of thing, and do it myself. I did not work with intentionally and probably naively, did not work with an editor for my first novel, because I figured since I'm self-publishing, I know all the advice that I'm getting from every single like podcast on writing, and every writer that I read about writing. They always say, you have to work with an editor no matter what. That's number one. But, being stubborn and kind of like wanting to like learn for myself, I made the conscious decision of not working with an editor for the first novel, with the intention of saying, okay, their advice, panned out. They were right, which I can say in retrospect. But since I self-published, now I have the ability to work with an editor and, edit the first novel before the second one, because it's the first novel is the one of three, the way I envision it in my head, and I'm working on the second one actively. So when I finish the second novel, it's definitely going straight to an editor, and I wanted to like work out a deal with them to also edit the first novel. And, you know, since it's self-published, like I have that flexibility. Like there's not like a lot of bureaucracy. I just literally work with, you know, find an editor that I like and that I can work with and pay them to, you know, edit the book.
That's good.
So I'm definitely
When we wrote the book, they gave us an editor, but we weren't happy. They were trying out someone new. And then I come from a pharmaceutical background, so I'm used to having really serious technical editors. So when we were unhappy with the first editor, we reached into our own pocket and we hired my medical editor. And she did a fantastic job.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely from what I've heard from other people's experiences, it's definitely a big deal to work with an editor that you can actually get along with and enjoy working with.
Right. And when they get to know you, the nice thing is they know where you go off the rails in your thinking. And so something may make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to them. And they know where to look out for those little detours.
Definitely. But yeah, with me, you know, definitely continuing all that. Like, we just had our second baby. So, I have that
Congratulations
focus
again.
on family.
Yeah.
Thank you. And, I still have my 9 to 5 in, financial data, which, a large part of having the idea to embark on like entrepreneurship, and the reason why I took the course with the idea of, one day opening up a laundry and then opening up a second and third store once I, figure out how to make it work, is to be able to exit from, the corporate life. And I guess it would be a lifestyle business, but that affords me a bit more free time to focus that much more on writing and podcasting, which is my like passion, you know what I mean? Without sacrificing the breadwinning aspect to, helping raise a family with my wife, who, also works full time. She actually works for NYU, Langone, the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she works for
What
there.
did you do there?
She's financial services.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a tough job now, just being in the hospital.
Definitely. Well, she is in a position where thankfully she can work from home. So, she doesn't have to report there every day, but she definitely deals with a lot of the financial side of, this crazy COVID like pandemic and, experience.
Oh my God.
Sad.
Yeah. It's not.
So Sandy, I want to, again, be mindful about your time. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your experience and your expertise with us. Is there anything else?
My pleasure. Thank you, Tony.
Awesome. Is there anything, like any advice that you want to leave us with, like for writers or entrepreneurs, or tell us again where folks can find you if they want to look you up online? And again, for everybody listening, I'm going to link to all of your stuff in the episode notes, but any closing words?
If anyone wants to take my, to get into the mastermind group, I'm co-running it with Fran McNeil, who has equal amount of experience with me, but in different areas. You can find that. You'll put that up, Tony. And otherwise, you can check me out. Don't get intimidated by the pharmaceutical stuff. I work in, obviously, fashion and other areas. You can go to www.marketingcures.com. And the GPS, we haven't put it up yet. I have a separate URL for that, which I don't have in front of me. But I'll give you the description and the URL, Tony. Because of the COVID, these mastermind groups usually run for about $3,500 to $4,000 a person for a year. We're doing it for $900 for the first year per person. So it's a really good investment. It'll just, if nothing else, and there's a lot else, if nothing else, it will force you to make a commitment to yourself to grow your business. And you're going to be successful whether you want to be or not.
Nice.
But we only take people who want to be successful.
Absolutely. You got to want it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Thank you again, Tony.
Thank you, Sandra. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. Take care.
You're welcome.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's the episode, folks. How great was that conversation? I hope you all got as much from it as I did. And actually, something I was thinking about while listening back to the episode was how I stumbled upon the Kaufman Fast Track course, which is, again, where I met Sandra because she's the instructor of the course. And I wanted to mention it to you all just in case anybody listening wants to take the course themselves, I highly recommend it. So for me, it was several months ago. And by the way, it came by way of what would sound like an unlikely connection to a course on entrepreneurship. But I was listening to a podcast like I usually am, and it was Matt Hoffa's podcast, Expert Opinion, which is a battle rap podcast, or a podcast I would say about hip hop in general, but with a focus on battle rap because that's the world that Matt Hoffa comes from. And he was interviewing Iron Solomon, another battle rapper, both New York guys, both legends within this space. Iron Solomon, whose real name is Aaron Solomon, was speaking about a business that he has, which is something along the lines, I forget the exact business name, but it's something along the lines of setting up for large events when stage and lighting and crews are needed and stuff like that. His company that he set up helps facilitate this, and he has contracts with the city. He has upwards of, I think he said like 100 and something employees or independent contract employees. It's on a rotating basis depending on the size of the different jobs and stuff like that he gets. And they asked him how he got started in that space, and he said that he stumbled upon this course called Fast Track. And he was speaking to things that, a lot of people don't really know about because they, don't take the time to do the research and find out and see what opportunities and useful tools are out there and available. And he mentioned how the New York City Department of Small Business Services pays for this course. I believe it's twice a year for a group of applicants that apply and, get accepted into the program. Otherwise, the program is a paid program. I believe it's like $1,500 or $2,000 for the course. But through this New York City Department of Small Business Services, you're able to, again, sign up. And if you're accepted, you get to take the course for free. And it's the same exact course. You get this wealth of knowledge and information from a knowledgeable instructor like Sandy, as well as the dozen plus other entrepreneurs that are taking the course with you. In my case, the course that I got accepted into, it was 17 of us, if I'm not mistaken, 16, 17 of us. And you get to learn from each other and grow. And you have for life all the tools that Kaufman Fast Track sets you up with online. It's a very intensive 6 hours a week, 2 nights a week for 12 weeks course where you learn fundamentals of business, like creating your business plan, learning how to do research on who your customer is, learning how to target your customer from a marketing perspective, fundamental things like setting up an LLC, profit and loss statements, and so much more. What was really important for me also in taking the course was the relationships that I formed with some of the people in the class that I hope continue to grow. It's good because obviously you learn from each other, you bounce ideas off each other, but you have people that are somewhat in the same space, mental space, of wanting to start a business or just started a business or have experience with the business already that you can draw on. It was a really valuable experience for me. And I'm going to link to both the New York City Department of Small Business Services in the episode notes, as well as the Fast Track, if anybody wants to check out the courses, because as Sandy mentioned in the episode, they do have other courses available as well. And I just wanted to share that little story of how I came across the course in the first place. And honestly, after I signed up for it, because it was several months ago, I completely forgot about it. I kind of did it off of, sounds interesting, let me sign up for it. I don't think, I'm going to be selected. Then I was. And it actually worked out perfectly because normally with my work schedule, I probably would not have had time to make it to the course in person. But since COVID, I guess kind of like a blessing in disguise, I've been working from home and the course was virtual. So we did it all through Zoom. So even though I'm sure the experience wasn't exactly the same as it would be had the course been in person, but I guess the silver lining for me, since the course was virtual, I was actually able to take it. And otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to. Either way, just wanted to share that with you folks. Again, I'll link to a lot of the things that we spoke about during this episode in the episode notes, as well as Sandra's book, which you all should definitely check out. It's available on Amazon. The title, again, is Lies startups tell themselves to avoid marketing. A no bullshit guide for PhDs, lab rats, suits, and entrepreneurs. Sandra, thanks again very much for giving us some time and coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. To everybody listening, I wish you again a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. Try to make the best of it. Look for those silver linings. And that's the episode, folks. Here's some outro information and some additional ways that you can help support the Spun Today podcast if you so choose. Peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today podcast financially by going to spuntoday.com/support. There you will find a couple different ways that you can do just that, some of which will actually not even cost you a dime, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. When you go to spuntoday.com/support, you'll see my affiliate link to Amazon. Click on it and it will take you to Amazon's website, where you can do your shopping like normal. This will not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will pay me for driving traffic to their website. If you'd like to support the podcast more directly, you can do so by becoming a patron. At spuntoday.com/support, you'll also find my Patreon link. This is where creators such as myself can be paid directly by patrons like you. You can either make a one-time donation or schedule recurring donations if you so choose. There are also different tiers of support, and depending on which you decide to go with, you'll also receive some perks in return, such as early access to content, free digital copies of my books, free bookmarks, etc. That is, again, by supporting via my Patreon link, available at spuntoday.com/support. Similar to Patreon, at that same location, you'll also find my Ko-fi link as well as my Buy Me a Coffee link. They work very similar to Patreon and are different ways that you can help support the show financially. And last but certainly not least, you have the good old-fashioned PayPal donation button. Any which way that you choose to support is greatly appreciated. It all helps me do more of what I love, which is writing and podcasting. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support. You can also support the Spun Today podcast by rating and reviewing the show wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. I'd really appreciate it because it really does help. Also, follow me on all socials. At Spun Today on X, formerly known as Twitter. At Spun Today on Instagram. And at Spun Today on YouTube, where you'll not only find full-length episodes of the podcast, but also chopped up clips and additional content. And of course, you can follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Another way you can help support the Spun Today podcast and also upgrade that stale wardrobe of yours is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the banner for Stitch Fix. Once you do, you'll enjoy a $25 discount to your first purchase. And the way Stitch Fix works is pretty cool. I use it and I've never been disappointed. You'll set up a profile. You'll put in all the sizes for your clothes, as well as all the different brands and types of clothes that you like to wear. It's really simple and intuitive to set up. They'll show you pictures and pretty much give you a thumbs up or thumbs down option on if you would wear something or not. And you get to select all the brands that you already are used to wearing. With this information, there are thousands of passionate, trend-setting stylists will curate a Stitch Fix box for you. They'll send you 5 items that you get to preview before they mail it to you, and you'll get to select based on the image if you like it or not. If not, they'll replace it with something else, and if so, they'll mail it to you absolutely for free. You can try everything on, and you have a few days to send everything back or keep the stuff that you want to keep. Then you can use that $25 credit that I mentioned towards your purchase of those items. Again, to freshen up your wardrobe and also support the Spun Today podcast, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on my affiliate link banner for Stitch Fix and enjoy your $25 credit. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account. where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to Libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, to get 2 months free. Or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's Libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. Take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.